Cool. Thank you for the reminder to record. There we go. It's recording now.
No problem.
Okay, so I had a few things that I thought would be interesting to talk about. Maybe if people could just give me a thumbs up if they are interesting, but even like super nascent ideas. Yeah, Taylor, it is there's something in the channel there. Okay, what are the things that I was thinking about? Cool use cases for run operations, or cool is maybe too strong of a word. Has anyone used run operations in their, is this a thing that's interesting to people, what they are, or like how to use them, things like that?
I'm not familiar with them, so sure.
Cool. So run, well, I guess it should be how to use an operation in a DBT project. So we used to see a whole lot of hackery happening in DBT, things like if you're on Redshift and you want to vacuum and analyze your warehouse, which is a thing that you need to do, we would do things like create a model and have the pre-hook run the vacuum and analyze, and then the model itself was like a select one. And doing all this like really hard work to like run arbitrary SQL. And that kind of was good because a lot of people coming into DBT are coming from a background where they are used to like being able to write that SQL a lot more easily. So kind of like having this like gate to being able to write that SQL is like a good idea, so they don't start writing their like insert and truncate and deletes and all that. But we internally were starting to use this pattern for things like turning warehouses on and off on Snowflake, and refreshing stages in Snowflake as well. I've actually been working with Snowflake much recently, and I sorely miss it. And so yeah, we built this new command in like 2013, and then it like was a beta command, and now it's official. Called run operation. I wish I'd done more prep, I haven't. But the idea being that basically you can write run operation and then give it the name of a macro. And in that macro, you can execute a query. So like any query, a select statement, which wouldn't make much sense in this context, but things like vacuum and analyze, and suspend warehouse, resume warehouse, things like that. So you can actually run these things like really independently, or like you can run a set of grant statements and do that like on like a separate schedule to say the rest of your jobs. Yeah, it's just like a tool, like another way that you can use DBT that is kind of cool, but it's also like very much and once you've already got like your models and things like that, it's just like a nice little extra thing that we built in on top. I know that, yeah, internally we're using it a lot with clients for stage refreshes or Snowpipe refreshes because they've turned off auto refresh. Yeah. I don't know if anyone has any comments on that.
Well, not really a comment, but I started looking into run operations to move some of the hooks that we have in the project. I wouldn't call it an issue, but the example that was given on the DBT docs was using a getty printable to return the output, and by default, it's so narrow that the output was actually not very usable or very useful. So I know I asked a question on the Slack, and Jake referred me to the documentation, but that's probably it. I don't know if it's the example that should be expanded or more documentation, but yeah, that's the issue I had with it, more having useful output rather than actually using them, because using them is actually fairly easy and straightforward.
Yeah, yeah, like once you start getting into like running queries, you've got to start interacting with agate objects, which is like just another layer on top of SQL, Ginger, and other things you've got going on. Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. We've done some really good stuff around like writing really nice, clean macros for, say, like in Redshift. You actually you have to vacuum frequently, but you can't vacuum a table that's more than 2,000 columns wide, and like surely none of your tables are more than 2,000 columns wide, so you're fine, right? But some of my clients do have tables that are more than 2,000 columns wide. So we've done like things to like run a query that returns all the tables that are less than 2,000 columns, and then iterate through that list to vacuum each one, and when you like vacuum them individually, you get better logging. That's a thing that I would really love to open source. Like, well, it should be open source. I just haven't had the time to write it up. But I think like those kinds of advanced use cases we should definitely be writing more about, because they're usually so specific to what you need to do that it's hard to write like a general documentation on it. But I think like writing a discourse article on like here, you know, like we've written the ones about grant statements, like here are the very specific grant statements that we do. So yeah, take that on board. I'll add it to the backlog. No promises when I'll write it up though.
Sounds good.
Okay. Dan, you're on 2 different screens at the moment. Cool.
Yeah, sorry, I was just installing the Zoom app because the web client was struggling a bit.
Okay. Two Dan hearts. Amazing.
Back down to 1.
Dan is in London, and I was watching the London DBT meetup, and I heard an Australian accent. I was like, I wonder if that's him. And it was. Cool. So another thing that like I've been thinking about, and I know the GitLab team already does some work on this front, is things around like ensuring code quality in DBT projects. So it's all like, first of all, every project should have, you know, coding conventions, and like in an ideal world, there'd be a really good SQL linter that enforces all of those. But there's always like things on top of that would be nice to like check in an automated way. And I have some ideas on like how to do this, but I'd be interested to learn like what other companies are doing, or like some things that I've done on client projects. But I'd be interested to learn like what other companies are doing. I know that I've seen the GitLab team have some unit tests, or I think in Python on top of their DBT project. Am I going crazy there?
Yeah, we have one that does, I think it checks the macro names. Emily, do you know better? Yeah, it's macro name check. I can pull up the code.
Yeah, so it checks that your macro is named the same thing as the file, like the file and the macro are named the same things. And then where there are macros that have like multiple named blocks within them, those are exceptions explicitly added in the code. But it's not star, it's functional. The other thing I'll highlight, and this never got off the ground, maybe someday in all my magical free time, there's a DBT event or row logger package that we're working on, which is, the goal is to like count star on each of your models, every one of your runs. It's pretty modeled after the event logging package. And then if the row count changes drastically between runs, the idea is a custom data test would fail. That's like the vision for it. We created the project that's kind of to do everything.
That's the exact same thing that's on our SQL linter at the moment, to do everything.
I've got an open issue to do a check against our Periscope Git directory. So if you change a model and a Periscope query is touching that model, it'll notify you. It'll probably fail the CI job or do something, so that if you change the name, it's like, hey, you need to also update this. It's still an issue to do everything, but
that's really cool. I know y'all aren't, those from GitLab aren't super fans of Looker, but there's Josh and Dylan in the community are working on a tool to do the same thing in Looker. So when you submit a PR on Looker, it like iterates through all your views, or maybe it's just the views that have changed. I'm not super close to this project, and just tries to like select every column. And if it can't, because like the column's been renamed or something like that, or you know, you changed your Looker code and you've given it the wrong reference, it'll fail. So it's interesting to think about like downstream contracts with DBT projects as well. Yeah, I've been doing I've done some hacky things in the past of like on Redshift, we always have a rule of if it's a table, then it should have a sort key, and Redshift now says that they do automatic disk keys, so we're not as strict on disk keys. So one thing that we've done is actually, let's see if I can open this up. Like throw an error if there is no sort key. Let me find this. No. Oh, I don't have it. Oh, wait. Get custom schema. No. Okay. I really am not super prepared today. I'm doing terribly. So essentially, the like get custom schema code gets run on every single. Oh no, I think it was a config thing. Yeah. So we had a pre-hook for every single model that just said like from the config block, if the model type, which is different to the model materialization, so if the model type is a table, so you want this for tables and incremental models, and like check that there's a sort key, and if there isn't a sort key, throw a compilation error. I really thought that I had this here. We've got a similar one here. I'll show this one. Share my screen. Cool. So this is like a similar thing for late binding views in Redshift. There's just some weird things that you've got to do here. So this was saying if this is materialized as a view, which is slightly different to the type, and like the config says that it's not a bound view, but like basically there's this whole thing for every model, there's like an object called model, and it's a dictionary. And so you can start to like tear apart really interesting things in terms of like the different configurations you've got set and materializations and the name of the model and the path and all these things. So you can start to like automate and or start to put some cool tests around, like, I don't know, is my file name, does it have double underscores, things like that. Brandon Lee on Slack the other day was talking about this in a thread where he was saying like they have a rule that everything's called like, schema __ table name, or whatever it is, Zendesk __ tickets. And so they actually put this code that checks for the double underscore in the like get alias, which one's DBT is hard. In the generate schema name and generate alias name, they check for those sorts of things because that macro gets called for every single model, which is really cool. And they like automatically split that file name at the double underscore, so that they use like the thing before the double underscore as the schema name, and the thing after is the alias in the warehouse. So I thought that was pretty cool. He's writing an article at the moment. He sent it through to me so to get some feedback. So hopefully we'll get that. We'll see that on Discourse in the next few days. Yeah. Anyone else doing anything cool in their projects in terms of like enforcing code quality?
Not yet. I hope to get there now that I have some help in the company. But definitely, all the everything you're doing right now inspires me a lot to do the same at some point.
Cool. Yeah, it's good when you like start to do these things. It's much nicer when a computer shouts at you than when a PR reviewer has to do it. And as someone that reviews things, I hate having to like pick. And it feels so much less personal when a bot is like, hey, you forgot a sort key. It's just nice. Cool. So other thing that I was interested in, I was hoping Josh was going to join us today, but he has not. Martin, this may just be most interesting to you. I don't know who else is using Looker on this call. Let's see if I can find this. CD, DBT docs to lookml. Let me share my screen.
I love how you say Looker.
Sorry?
I love how you pronounce Looker.
Looker. I was just on the phone to like, I don't know, 311 complaining about my landlord is he has to Philadelphia, and I have to put on an American accent when I call hotlines, and it's pretty funny. Josh Temple, recently wrote a package for lookml, which basically take lookml code and it's a Python parser for lookml code, which means it can now like load lookml into a dictionary, but now it can also take like a dictionary and dump it back into lookml, just assuming it's the right shape. So on a very long plane trip recently, I wrote a little script which parses the manifest file from the DBT project and parses the lookml from a lookml repo, and basically very, very naively at the moment says, if your model name is the same as the SQL table name, update the description of your DBT, like take the description of your DBT project and put it into your lookml project. No testing whatsoever. It was a proof of concept. There is a repo if you look really hard. There's things that are hard-coded, like my local file. This was just a thing we were playing with. But it's pretty cool. Like it's a thing that would not have been possible to do if Josh had not written this parser in pure Python. Well, before you would have had to like install, use a package in Python to install like the Node, the npm version of this. I don't know anything about that world of programming. But yeah, I just wanted to share that was like a small thing that I'm working on. Again, like to Emily's comment of like, with all my free time, I'll be working on that. It's very much like, if I have free time, that might be a thing we look into. But it's also open source. This one's just straight to a public repo, committing straight to master at the moment. So if anyone wants to check it out and take it on as a side project, you can definitely. I wouldn't even bother forking it because the code is not that great, but you can definitely have a look there for like what we're thinking on this front.
Yeah, I love the idea that right now having to duplicate the logic in two places, even though there's a lot less duplication than before, is still a bit aggravating sometimes.
Yeah.
I love that.
Cool. It's a thing that comes up like semi-frequently, and the exciting thing is that it, like before, the answer was just like, it's not possible. And now it's like, okay, it's possible, we just haven't built the thing. So massive hat tip to Josh Temple there for that. Yeah, and then the other thing that like I thought may be interesting to say, like what's going on in my world, I was up in New York 2 days ago to speak on a panel about analytics engineering. That was also at a Looker meetup, but in fact, everyone on the panel would use DBT and not everyone on the panel used Looker, so that was pretty interesting. And yeah, this like analytics engineering thing, it's a hot topic. We had like 120 people there, is my guess. And just good confirmation that everyone in this community is like at the forefront of where this space is. They asked questions about like, how do you hire for this role? Are these people unicorns? And I was like, well, they're not unicorns because we're sitting in this room, like the 5 people that were sitting at the front of the room all fit this description, but they are very hard to find, and probably all of them in New York were in that room on the one night. So that's really fun, just like to see the impact that this software is having, like that DBT is having in terms of like changing the landscape of like the space around us. Like before DBT, you couldn't have put like the transformation layer in the hands of an analyst, and I came from the analyst background and now this analytics engineer, and that really resonated with a lot of people. So I think like super exciting from a growth of DBT perspective, somewhat daunting from a Slack number of messages posted a day perspective, but we've got a plan for that too. So yeah, hopefully some new things coming out on that front, which I could talk about as well. If anyone's interested in that.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So I mentioned I was back home for all of August. And it was really interesting being out of hours with Slack, and just like waking up each morning and seeing what had happened the day before. Taylor had some tweets while I was actually on leave about what was happening on Slack, and I was like, I don't want to see it when I get back. But it wasn't that bad. And it's really interesting, like, attention is the most valuable commodity that we have in the 21st century. And so, we feel exceptionally grateful that people give us some of their attention, that they want to engage with us through Slack. But what, like, I guess, like, now that we're going past the early adopter phase and into the masses, our Slack's pretty unique in that, like, it's full of such incredibly intelligent people that are so willing to help. Like, I personally I'm indebted to the Slack community that I joined, you know, in January of 2017, and basically taught me how to do my job. But that's not what most open source Slacks are like. Most open source Slacks, people enter them and there's really low engagement, and you do have to, like, post across multiple channels to get anyone to answer a question, or you have to tag people and things like that. And so what we really want to communicate to people is that, you know, our Slack's special. And it's like, you know, it's kind of that, like, you know, in this house we do that kind of meme. But, like, you know, like, our Slack's very special. It's full of, like, such intelligent people, and, like, the main rule of the road is, you know, be respectful. So we are sort of putting together some community guidelines at the moment. We've got a few different levers that we'll be pulling to disseminate those. So we'll be putting out an announcement. It might be today, it might be tomorrow, to share those. Maybe it might be next week. Like, an announcement to people in Slack. We also have a welcome message, which if you've joined before 6 months ago, you wouldn't have seen it. We only put it up 6 months ago. So we'll be pointing to the community guidelines more in that, and also making it shorter. It got a little bit long because I, like, added too many helpful things in, and probably people ignore it now. So we'll be doing that, but we're also going to update the slack.getdbt.com page to have, like, more acknowledgement of, hey, this is, like, a community that I'm joining. That one's going to take a little bit longer because I don't know how to build websites. So yeah, that's not a thing that I can do independently. I need help from someone else on the team. And the other thing we're going to be doing is a welcome email as well. So the flow will essentially look like, if you want to join DBT Slack, you're going to sign up and really, like, acknowledge the rules of the road and, like, the tone that we have. And like, I'm happy to share those. They're still a work in progress. So they're in a Google Doc at the moment. Rules of the road. Yeah. So yeah, it's really, like, trying to phrase it from the perspective, how do I actually get, I know my screen's not sharing the proper size, but I can never get it. I don't know how to resize it. Anyway, one day I'll figure out Zoom. Yeah, like, you know, we use the right channel. We ask really good questions. We avoid double posting. We keep in public channels. We welcome helpful vendors. Like, if someone from Snowflake, for example, is joining and they contribute really positively, they're not pushing their product. Like, we don't sit on DBT Slack and tell everyone they should use DBT Cloud. We let other community members do that, but, like, we're there to build a community and not to sell our product, and that's sort of part of it. And we don't @channel, @here, or @Drew, @Claire. And we really love threads. Emily sent me a message today saying, may your day be filled with threads. So yeah, the flow will look like, when you get to the Slack landing page, we'll acknowledge these rules, these community guidelines, and, like, we'll have a link to, you know, we're going to integrate with the API to be like, you know, we have 2,700 and whatever people in this Slack right now. So people really understand what they're doing. We're also going to collect, this is all, you know, we're going to do it in different phases, but just the happy path, the ultimate flow. When you sign up, first name, last name, and the company name. And so we'll set your name to, like, Taylor Murphy, GitLab in brackets. And you can edit that afterwards, but it just, like, gives us the upper hand. And you'll then get, like, your welcome email to Slack, which will have a link to the things that you just agreed, as well as, like, other useful information. Join Slack. There'll also be a Slack bot message. And yeah, and the other thing that, like, we're really going to encourage is we have some great community members who, like, the best culture is the self-reinforcing one, the one that, like, you know, you get told once and then you sort of, like, and we want to definitely assume good intent. Like, some people don't know how to use threads, don't realize that, like, it's kind of annoying if you don't use threads. Like, we just want to like communicate to them like, hey, it's actually really helpful if you do use them. And so we're going to be relying more on other community members to help us enforce that. And we think once that these guidelines are written down, it'll make it easier for people to do that confidently.
Can we get like Twitter approved badges for some of us?
You can just Photoshop a tick into your own profile photo. There's no mechanism on Slack to do that, unfortunately. But yeah, like since coming back, I've been much more intentional about when I'm on Slack and when I'm not. It's super noisy, and I love it, and I love the Slack community. I want to keep contributing to it. I want it to keep growing. I want it to be a place where people can come and they can learn. And you know, the number of people who have told me, like people in Sydney who say, hey, it's like the first thing that I do each day. I go through and I read the really interesting conversations and I get inspiration for like what problems other people are solving. And, you know, maybe I'm not up to there on my DBT project yet, but it's good to, like, to think about these problems and to realize like, oh, someone else has a solution for that. In which case we should probably put on discourse. But like, I want Slack to keep going, but we're being much more like, I only check it every few hours and I just sort of reply to the ones that haven't been replied to yet. Unless it's about BigQuery, in which case I'm always like, sorry, that's not for me because I don't know anything about BigQuery. And so yeah, we're just trying to find the balance and see how we can still grow it and still have all the positive things. But we do recognize that like it isn't always perfect. There are people that just ask such low effort questions, and we need to be really clear that like that's not respectful to us and to the rest of our community. Yeah. So that's our plan for Slack.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, just got to carve out the time to execute it. Cool. So that's pretty much all of my updates. We've got lots of other things going on the community front to do everything. Yes. We've got lots of other things happening on the community front. A company is speaking at reInvent, and for the first time ever, the DBT logo is going to be on the reInvent stage, which is pretty wild. So that's cool. We've got, I'm hoping to have a Boston meetup soon. Drew's heading to Montreal.
Yeah, very excited.
Yeah. Yeah, so lots of exciting things on the community front. I don't have too much of a product update. I know what's happening on product, but it's not top of mind for me, so I can't just, pull it out of my short-term memory as quickly. But yeah, cool. I'm going to throw it open to everyone, like we normally do. Does anyone have any like DBT things they're working on? Any conferences they're speaking at? Any that was kind of a hint to a particular person on this call? Anything exciting happening in their world that crosses over with data that they want to share?
Are you speaking at any conferences soon?
I don't know. Am I seeing you at a conference soon?
I think that we're on a panel together on Tuesday. Does that sound about right?
That sounds right.
Yeah, so Claire and I are speaking on a panel on Tuesday in New York City at a GitLab commit event on data ops. If you're in New York, I have some coupon codes for tickets still, so feel free to DM me on Slack because I've given you permission, so it's okay to DM if you're in New York and interested in the tickets. But we're going to be talking about data ops. I'm also going to be doing a live coding demo on deploying your first DBT project. So if you're looking to see that, hopefully it'll be a great way to introduce some new people to the DBT ecosystem and community.
Are any of these going to be recorded?
I don't know.
Okay. Maybe.
I'm sure they'll be recorded. I don't know if they're going to be shared.
I really wanted that to be like a planted question. I was like, I actually don't know the answer to this.
Yeah, it is an event with people paying money and tickets, so I don't know at this time, but
we'll definitely share it if it comes up. Yeah. Cool. There was a question in the office hours channel, but I think it got answered. Is that right? Oh yeah, Jonathan is not on the call, so I assume he got a sufficient answer from Martin, who has been filling it on Slack lately.
And I'll actually, I've mentioned that to Claire, but I actually do a pull request tomorrow to include that macro and DBT utils, because it's actually extremely useful. And unfortunately, I didn't note down who wrote that macro. Someone on Slack who shared it at some point. I thought that's going to be useful in the future, and I saved it and actually used it in the project a couple of times. So it's so I'll do a pull request. And if somebody comes up with, hey, I wrote that, we'll do the proper credit. But it's actually extremely useful. It's a schema test for relationships, but where you can include a where predicate so that you can exclude some of your rows to avoid returning false positives. So it's actually pretty nice.
Yeah, I think like the question itself was coming from like the problem of asynchronous data load aspect. You know, when you've got your customers table which gets updated, then your orders table gets updated, but then your order has a customer ID and that customer got created in the last 2 minutes and they weren't in the customers table. That's a thing that like has come up on Slack before, and I remember seeing that answer, so I'm really glad that someone jotted it down. I've solved it before with like querying in my base model, querying I was using Fivetran at the time, the Fivetran system tables to find the like timestamp of the last like absolute complete sync and filtering on that. But it was like it was pretty expensive to do that. Like, it was a query resources, so it wasn't perfect. So yeah, pretty good solution. Excited to see more things in utils. Any other DBT questions, suggestions, t-shirt ideas?
Bit of a random one. When you were talking about DBT run commands earlier, I was wondering if anyone's using stored sort of like table functions or anything like that, and if they version control those using something like a run statement, or if people are using those at all, or if they prefer to maybe use DBT macros for that.
What do you mean by a stored table function?
So say you want to dynamically generate a pivot with date columns for a certain range or something like that. Not like the nicest use cases, but unfortunately I have like a couple of those. You could do that through a SQL function that returns a table, or how else would you approach it, and how would you version control if you are using any stored functions like that?
So I version control my UDFs in Snowflake with DBT.
Yeah.
And Claire wrote a Redshift one that translates real clean.
Yeah, I think we need to take the like Redshift only sticker off that one, because I wrote it before I worked here and I only had exposure to Redshift, so I had no idea if it worked on Snowflake, and it didn't work on BigQuery, but it now works on BigQuery. Yeah, I had a discussion about this the other day with someone. You can, for that use case of like pivoting things out and storing things in memory, you kind of like have to do it in a macro, because you need to like hold that thing that you're pivoting by in memory. And it's not like a scalar operation on a row. But if it is a UDF, if you're doing as an example I wrote up with like converting it, like doing a date trunk where the output is like the formatted string. So they're like year, month, if it's date trunk to month, but like as a string as opposed to the timestamp. That was a thing that I had to do once. You can do that.
That's actually exactly what I have to do at the moment. Yeah.
I will send you that code. It's on Discourse as well. Sorry.
I just did links in the chat for where we're doing it on Snowflake. Like we're storing our UDFs in our macros folder, and then we have a create UDFs macro.
Cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then this is the discourse post that we had the other day where someone was asking he was like, do I do an UDF? Do I do a macro? Most people at Fishtown are like pro macros. They just like macros. They're easier to write usually because like the macros, like the arguments in and arguments out feels natural. Whereas the UDFs, you have to think about like, well, how do I do it in a create that UDF, and there's like some weird syntax to it. But I like UDFs because they're easier to, you spend the effort writing them once. And then when you're writing your models, they might feel much more familiar to use as opposed to like calling out to a macro. So I personally lean on the side of like UDF over a macro if possible. And the example that I wrote in that article is the like data string thing, which I don't even remember why I was doing it. It was I think it was for a BI tool thing. Yeah, there are a few things that I have changed a lot of my opinions since moving into this company, but there are some things that I will die on a hill for, and I won't die on a hill for that one, but I haven't changed my mind yet.
Yeah, most of my UDFs are like JavaScript functions or Python if it was Redshift.
Yeah.
And then I actually go the opposite route and I try and do it all in macros if I can.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a few UDFs that were like, could only be UDFs because they were Redshift Python things. But something like extracting the path from a URL, you can do that with like regex matching kind of thing, and you can package it up as a UDF in SQL. Like you can imagine what this pure SQL look like, but you can also do it as well. Okay. It's just like what wrapper do you want to put around it? Cool.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Hi everybody, I'm Travis. I work at Bowery Farming. I have something that I'm.
Sorry.
Yeah. Hi Claire. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
I've been trying to work on. So we have this like slowly changing dimension table that's built off of a bunch of different like state messages, and it's like a ton of state messages, like 100 million of them. And I'm trying to write it so that it incrementally updates. Because it takes forever. It's like 20 minutes for each of our DBT runs just to run this one model. But I'm running into some trouble with it because it's actually hard to make an incremental, slowly changing dimension table, or at least like we haven't done it yet. And so I'm like trying to write a macro that like encompasses that logic, but it's pretty subtle. And so I was like curious if anybody else had worked on that before.
I have not.
Because so I guess kind of how it works is like, we have a bunch of different state messages, and then for each individual entity that's like identified by a singular ID column, in this case it's like a device, we'd have like the state over time, and we'd say like, oh, for this state it was valid from this state and then valid to this state. And then at the end, there's one record that says it's valid from this state and valid to infinity, like it's still open. And then, we get a bunch of new state messages, and we're trying to say, okay, close that one record where the valid to was infinity, and then stick in the next like SCD records. So I'm starting to do that with like upserting and creating like another ID based on the original ID concatenated with the valid from date. But we run into issues where if we like sometimes get a state message with a valid from that was like earlier in history, and now you need to like go back and like recreate that bit of that like section of the table or whatever within that partition. Yeah, so it's getting pretty hairy.
Yeah, it's very hard to abstract these things away into like a good advice thing. We do some handling of late arriving facts in like our segment package, also the snowflake package. And we use incremental models there, and that's sort of it's a thing where you're changing the grain in the query. So like you're going from page views to sessions. So the like logic isn't super nice in terms of like, how do you reprocess those records, because it's not like a nice one-to-one mapping, which I think would be a similar thing here, where you don't have, like, you're creating these valid periods, which is like nice one-to-one mapping of the source data that you have. So there's some like tricks we have in there in terms of like running a CT at the top to sort of find, like, to first filter for all the IDs that have arrived, or all the like users that have events since the last thing that have arrived since the last thing, and only kind of creating like the sub list and then joining to that list. It's very hard to explain, but I would check out the segment package. I think the snowplow package is slightly in better shape than the segment package, but I have only worked with segment, so very strange. My last company, I worked with Redshift and segment, and every client I've been on, I've worked with Redshift and segment. So I know we definitely do in a segment package. I'm not sure if we do it in the snowplow package. I think we do though.
Okay, cool. Will I find it if I like Google segment?
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I'll put it in the chat now.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
Segment DBT.
Slightly related question. Can you tell a model to full refresh itself? Like, if certain logic holds, then like run a full refresh on this model, like within the Jinja in the model itself.
I can think of hacky ways.
Yeah, same.
Oh, yeah. I'm here for hacky ways as well.
Well, so the thing is, you wouldn't use the incremental model materialization specifically. Like, I think you would just customize your where clause around. You would have that like, if condition is true, where this filter, which is what the incremental materialization does. But like, if this other condition is true, don't have this filter, is what you're saying.
Like, don't have that filter and then include all of the old records in as well, and do like an upserting.
It's just a where clause on time, right? Like, that's all an incremental model is saying rerun everything from this point in time forward.
I guess, and then also delete the old records if they were there.
If they have the same unique ID, then you'll be fine. Like, it'll
right. Okay.
The incremental model do that. I will send the segment thing in a second. I'm going to try and find the like exact SQL that does it. So I'll send that slightly later, maybe in like the Slack channel. But here's like a cool thing that I don't know if anyone kind of knows this about DBT. Those that have worked on it. Emily, how do I share more of my screen? Why is my green box only on half my screen?
No, I see your full screen.
Do you see like all the way down here?
Yeah, the full browser window.
Yeah, okay. My green box is like halfway across.
Oh.
This thing where it says I can't live like this anymore.
Oh, I've seen that before. I think it's sometimes a bug on the version. You might just be on an older version.
Great. So Emily spends a lot of her day working on Zoom. So we're working with people via Zoom. So I don't know if you know this, but DBT itself has a project in it. Which is why when you have a DBT run, there's always like 180 macros, even though like you haven't added anything to a project. It's because like DBT itself has its own project. And the reason I'm showing this is because if you look really hard in this, you'll find this code, which is incremental code. So when you like are writing your incremental section, Travis, I don't know how long you've been working with DBT for, but up until like maybe 6 months ago, if you were writing that thing, you used to have to write like if flags.full rate refresh and type equals incremental or something like that. Like you had to literally write this thing where if it was materializes incremental and not flags full refresh, like you had to write that out yourself, and we just put a macro on top of it to like abstract it away to make it easier to write. So like to Emily's point of what's actually happening under the hood is it's just checking these conditions. So instead of writing like if is incremental, you can write if is incremental or like, you know, whatever the other conditions are, or, you know, an add condition and things like that. So you can just add that if statement and put more conditions on it, so that it gets triggered with these other conditions that you want to trigger it.
That makes sense. Thanks for showing that.
That's okay. Yeah, it's a cool little design thing, I think, that DBT is itself a project. It's why you can like override the like get, I can never remember the name of these things, like the get custom schema and get custom alias, like why if you add that to your own project, it like overrides the default thing because the DBT itself has a project. So if you're ever interested in learning a bit more about DBT, or like why you can override like the unique test, because it's just a macro. And there's logic to say if you have a macro with the same name in your own project, then favor that one over the global version. So this is the code for the unique. It looks like something that like, you could add to your own project very easily. That was just a little aside. Cool.
I do have a question. So I was poking around in the Fishtown Analytics Hub namespace, and I could not find a project for Hub, but I'd like to create an issue. Is that openly available?
I have no idea. I suspect not if you couldn't see it.
I didn't know if it was named something else.
It's just hub.getdbt.com. I'm just going to open it in incognito and it's an easy way to check. Oh yeah, it's a private repo.
Okay, if we have an issue
about that decision.
Can I just create it in DBT core for now?
Just you have my express permission to DM me for that one.
Okay, thank you.
I'll add it, and we always, for like things like DBT Cloud as well, when people have feature requests, we just put them in our issues and then we say like ping so and so when this one's done. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Anything else? We're all good? Okay, excellent.
I just got the announcement that all sessions that commit in New York City will be filmed, and the majority of them will be posted on the YouTube channel within 24 hours, with the rest following shortly thereafter.
Fantastic. So if anyone wants to watch a panel on data ops, we'll share the link for that when that gets published. That's awesome. Cool. Okay. Yep. That's it from me. I'll end the meeting now. Thank you so much for joining. I'll hopefully see some of, well, Emily, I'll see you next week. Travis, I'll see you soon because you're pretty close by. Dan, we're in London in October, so I'll invite you to our happy hour. And hopefully I'll make it up to Montreal at some point in the next 6 months or so.
Oh boy.
Fingers crossed. Okay, see ya.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers, everyone.